obviously that can be a bit fine at the margin sometimes, but our real focus is on particular concerns around, generally speaking, human rights, international obligations, and the rule of law. Our submissions tend to be, certainly in my experience, quite technical sometimes. And I think it's helpful for the committee that we just focus on one or two key concerns in our oral submission because I am conscious of your time. So Simon and I have divided things up, and the two things we're going to talk about orally are, I'm going to talk to you about special directions, which is section 3 of the written submission, looking at clauses 7 to 11 and then 15 of the bill. And then Simon is going to talk to you about deportation liability for residence visa class holders. And that's section 5 of our submission. We agree as the Law Society, and we've said this in several previous submissions, that it is a good thing that officials in Parliament are moving towards creating legislation that gives a bit more flexibility to deal with exceptional circumstances. And that's how we interpret these new clauses around special directions. They're intended to give some flexibility. And we've said in the past, partly in the post-COVID-19 landscape, that you probably all know this, but there was a lot of rushed legislation that had to be dealt with in order to respond to gaps in existing legislation. So we support the policy intent to that extent. I also want to acknowledge up front that we're impressed by both the basic flexibility of the powers and some of the safeguards that have been drafted by officials, but the Law Society does see its role to emphasize the importance of striking a balance when you are giving those kinds of exceptional, departing from baseline rules and usual assumptions and regulations and legislation. And in particular, we do think these provisions need some more work. And the two things that I want to talk about in terms of what I'm saying orally, we've given a list of proposed suggestions right at the end of our section 3 of the submission. The first thing is about the way in which the minister who issues these variations is entitled to issue them. And we think it's more consistent with general drafting practice and good balance striking to change that idea of satisfied to what we've suggested is reasonably necessary. And that's a criteria that you'll see quite often in situations where ministers are given powers to depart from legislation or from existing regulations. For example, that was used in the Christchurch earthquake legislation a few governments ago. And we think that strikes a better balance by ensuring that there is still some executive flexibility, but also recognizing that when you're changing laws, not quite on the hoof, but necessarily at speed, there needs to be a little bit more care about the way in which that's done. The other key concern that I wanted to raise orally is that the way that the particular exceptions have been drafted seems to us to be a bit of a mismatch between the policy problem that has been identified